"Do you have any idea who I am?" The question wasn't loud, but it struck the space between them with the weight of a slammed door. Daniel Porter lifted his eyes from the menu, confusion tightening his brow. The woman sitting across from him was breathtaking, dressed in a simple yet unmistakably expensive navy dress. Her dark hair was pulled back into a sharp, elegant twist, and her expression was colder than the restaurant's marble floors. "I'm sorry," Daniel said softly. "I don't think so." "Should I?" A flicker of disbelief or maybe anger crossed her face. She glanced past him toward a corner booth where several sharply dressed men tried, and failed, to hide their laughter behind their hands. Daniel felt his stomach drop. He knew them. The finance boys from the 38th floor are the ones who passed his cleaning cart every night. Without so much as a nod, one of them, Gregory Pike, lifted his phone as if checking a notification. The tiny red light of a recording flashed on the camera, and Daniel understood. This wasn't a date. It was a setup, a humiliation. The woman in human form turned her gaze back to him. "My name is Miranda Ellison," she said, every word clipped and frigid. "Chief Investment Officer of Ellison Financial." "The company where you, Mr. Porter, work as a janitor." It had all begun 8 hours earlier with a lie. Daniel was polishing the glass lobby doors, surrounded by the smell of lemon cleaner, when Gregory Pike and his buddies approached him. They never spoke to him, ever. "Porter," Gregory greeted, wearing a predator's smile. "Big night for you, my man." Daniel kept wiping, unsure why they were talking to him at all. "A few of us were chatting," another man added. "We think you're a solid guy. Quiet, hard-working. You deserve something good." Gregory leaned on the reception desk. "There's a woman in accounting. Smart, beautiful, a little shy. She's noticed you. We thought we'd help out a little blind date. Our treat." Daniel paused mid-wipe. At 34, his life revolved around his 7-year-old daughter, La, and the steady, uneventful rhythm of night shifts. Dating wasn't even on the back burner. It wasn't in the kitchen. "I appreciate it," he said gently, "but I don't think so." "Oh, come on," Gregory pushed, grin widening. "Don't you get lonely?" 8 o'clock tonight. Reservations already made. Don't leave the lady waiting." Daniel refused 3 more times. They kept insisting, making it sound like turning them down would be rude. A small, fragile thought of one he hadn't felt in years began to form. Maybe broken bar, maybe it wouldn't hurt to try. When he came home that evening, Lou was coloring a unicorn with intense concentration at their tiny kitchen table. She looked up, her bright eyes so much like her mother's, studying him. "Daddy, you look nervous," she observed with disarming honesty. He smiled faintly. "Some people from work set me up in a broken bar meeting with a new friend." Her face lit up instantly. "A friend? Is she pretty?" "I don't know, sweetheart. I haven't met her yet." "You should go," she declared, hopping off her chair. She rushed to his small closet and pulled out his one good shirt, the dark gray button-down he'd worn at her mother's funeral and never since. "Wear this one. It makes your eyes look like the sky." Her innocence nudged him past his hesitation. For her, he wanted to be more than a tired janitor. He wanted to believe life still had room for good things. Across the city, in a gleaming penthouse, Miranda Ellison was having a similar conversation, but hers was laced with suspicion, not hope. "A blind date, Gregory? I don't have time for this," she said, eyes fixed on a quarterly report on her tablet. Nearby, her 5-year-old daughter, Maya, silently stacked blocks into a perfect tower. "He's ideal for you," Gregory insisted through the phone. "Self-made entrepreneur, built his company from scratch. Just like you. Sharp, ambitious, and he asked about you after seeing your Forbes feature." Miranda exhaled. It had been a year since her husband walked out, a year of brutal workdays and even harsher silence from her daughter. Specialists all gave the same diagnosis: the trauma of abandonment had stolen Maya's voice. Maybe a night out would help. Maybe she needed, just once, to feel like someone other than a CEO or a struggling mother. "Fine," she said, "one drink." But just as she was preparing to leave, her phone buzzed again, the babysitter canceling last minute. Miranda stared at Maya's enormous, expressive eyes. She couldn't leave her, yet the thought of another silent night felt unbearable. She made a choice. She would bring Maya along. It was only one drink. What harm could it do? Back in the restaurant, Daniel felt the world tilt. Every piece clicked painfully into place. The shy woman from accounting, the self-made businessman, all lies. A cruel joke for wealthy men who thought his life was entertainment. He pushed back his chair. I should go. Number. Miranda's voice was soft but unshakable. Her eyes locked on Gregory's table, radiating fury. You will sit, we will eat, and we will not give those pathetic boys the victory they came for. A small shape appeared beside Miranda, a little girl, Maya. She'd been sitting near the entrance with the hostess, a broken bar, and with another child. Daniel's sister had dropped her off, thinking the date would be ending soon. Mommy, I'm hungry, Maya signed with her hands. No sound coming from her lips. La grinned brightly at her. Hi, I'm La. Your mom is so pretty, and my daddy is handsome, right? Daniel's heart felt like it cracked open. He looked at Miranda, and not the powerful executive he'd seen from afar, but a mother carrying a pain he understood. Slowly, he sat back down. The joke wasn't over, far from it. It was only beginning. A waiter approached, wearing the expression of someone pretending not to notice anything unusual. Good evening. Can I start you off with something to drink? Miranda didn't break her stare from Gregory's table, a silent warning of what was coming for them. I'll have sparkling water, Miranda said coolly, and bring 2 Shirley Temples for the young ladies. She turned to Daniel, her tone sharp enough to slice the air. What will you have? Mr. Porter. Using his last name wasn't politeness, it was a reminder, a boundary. He was staff, she was the executive. Just water, Daniel replied quietly, setting his menu down. There was no way he was ordering anything expensive, not tonight. Not under the eyes of the people who orchestrated this spectacle. La swung her legs under the table, cheerful and completely unaware of the grown-up tension simmering around her. Daddy, can I have a cherry? Can I have 2? Of course, he said, forcing a warmth he didn't feel. The drinks arrived, and with them came a suffocating quiet. Daniel could feel Gregory's table watching them, waiting for the moment Miranda snapped at him, waiting for his embarrassment, waiting for the punchline. But Miranda didn't react. She sat like a queen on a throne, unmoved, unbroken, refusing to give their audience so much as a glance. It was La who finally shattered the silence. She leaned toward Maya, whispering, my favorite color is glitter. What's yours? Maya lifted her gaze. Her huge dark eyes glimmered with a depth far older than her small frame suggested. She parted her lips at just a tiny hopeful movement, but then closed them tightly again. Her eyes dropped to her lap. A flash of frustration crossed her face. She picked up a fork, gripping it so tightly her knuckles whitened, and looked at her mother pleadingly. Her favorite color is blue, Miranda supplied softly. The frost in her voice had evaporated, replaced by a tired ache. And she wants to know if your dress has pockets. La giggled. It does. For hiding secrets. She turned back to Maya. It's okay if you don't want to talk. Sometimes I feel shy too. But Daniel knew this wasn't shyness. It was a locked door, a one only Maya had access to. He saw the tiny tear gathering in Maya's eye before it slid silently down her cheek. That was the breaking point. Humiliation he could handle. Being mocked he could swallow. But watching a child silently hurt, that he could not endure. Something long buried inside him, the part that used to help children like her, stirred awake. He ignored Miranda's startled look and reached for a sugar packet from the bowl in the center of the table. He tore a corner, tapped a few crystals onto the table, arranging them into a sparkling little star. Then he dipped his finger in his water and let a single drop fall beside it. Hey, Maya, he said softly. Look. A wishing star, a broken bar, and a magic moon. Maya's head lifted, her eyes fixed on the tiny scene. La gasped in awe. Daniel didn't look at Maya directly. He knew direct attention might shut her down. Instead, he gently nudged the water droplet so it slid toward the sugar star. The moment the droplet touched it, the crystals dissolved into a little swirl. The moon gave the star a hug. He whispered, now the wish is safe inside. When he finally glanced up, Maya wasn't sad anymore. Her eyes were wide with wonder. A faint, precious smile touched her lips. She looked at the sugar bowl, then at him, asking without words. Daniel nudged the bowl toward her. With slow, careful movements, she took a sugar packet and pushed it back toward him. It was a request, an invitation. Miranda froze. her hands suspended on her glass. She had poured millions into elite specialists and neurologists, therapists, researchers. They came with charts and theories and sterile, clinical tools. None of them had ever coaxed a single smile from Maya. None had ever broken through the barrier. Yet this janitor, the one chosen as the butt of a joke, had done more in seconds with a sugar packet than experts had in years. Dinner unfolded in a blur. Miranda insisted they order food, leaving no room for argument. The girls ate, while Daniel and Maya continued crafting tiny galaxies and comets across the table. The laughter from Gregory's corner had died completely, replaced by confused, irritated whispering. Their elaborate prank had completely unraveled. When they rose to leave, Miranda locked eyes with Daniel. The icy armor was gone. In its place was something raw, searching, almost desperate. In the grand foyer, Walla excitedly told her aunt about the magic moon on the phone. Miranda stepped into Daniel's path. "The specialists have a name for it," she said, her voice barely audible. "Selective mutism. Trauma-induced. They say there's no cure, a broken bar, only strategies." She swallowed hard. None of them worked. She moved closer. "I have spent more money than I care to admit trying to help my daughter, and you did what they couldn't." With a drop of water, her eyes burned into him. "So you're going to tell me who you really are, right now?" Daniel felt the old pressure, the weight of expectations he'd failed before. The man he used to be, the man who couldn't save the ones who mattered most. "I'm the guy who cleans your lobby," he said quietly. "That's all." Miranda's eyes narrowed, the CEO re-emerging. "I don't believe you. And you are going to help my daughter." It wasn't a request, it was a command. Something inside Daniel snapped, years of buried pain and resentment igniting in one spark. He met her gaze, this powerful woman who thought the world bent to her, and gave the one answer she never expected. "Number." The word was soft, but final. "I can't help her," he added. "I'm just a janitor, remember?" He turned, took Liz's hand, and walked out into the cold night air, leaving Miranda Ellison standing alone in that warm, golden foyer. Miranda Ellison was not used to rejection. The word did not exist in her world. People didn't tell her no, they complied. Now she sat in the back of her chauffeured car, the city lights blurring outside the tinted window, replaying that single, quiet word, "number." It infuriated her, it confused her, and worst of all, a broken bar. It terrified her. For a fleeting moment back at the restaurant, when she saw the janitor gently guiding her daughter, Miranda had felt something she hadn't experienced in an entire year, a hope. It had been delicate, unfamiliar, and now Daniel had snatched it away, leaving her with the cold, crushing weight she knew too well. He had cracked open a door for Maya only to slam it shut again. She refused to accept that. She couldn't. This wasn't a failed deal at the office. This was her child's life. By the time she stepped into her silent penthouse, her fury had hardened into a sharp, determined clarity. Daniel Porter was a Ridley and Miranda Ellison excelled at solving riddles. Meanwhile, in their small third-floor apartment, the warm scent of cinnamon toast drifted through the air as Daniel tucked Lee into bed. "Daddy," she murmured, wrapping her tiny arms around his neck. "Will we see Maya again? She's nice." Daniel's chest tightened. "We'll see, sweetheart." It had been an emotional night, more complicated than she could ever understand. "But you made her smile," Lee mumbled proudly. "You used your magic." That word hit him like a memory he wasn't ready for. Magic. Sarah used to call it that, his ability to reach withdrawn, hurting children and gently pull them into the light. He had built a respected career on that gift. He had spent years healing others. But when Sarah fell ill, all of his magic had failed. No amount of patience or playful therapy could drive the cancer from her body. He had watched the brightest person he had ever known fade away, powerless to save her. After losing her, trying to help anyone else felt like a lie. How could he mend someone else's world when he couldn't save his own? So he walked away from his career, from everything he was, and found a job where no one would ever ask him to work miracles again. He pressed a kiss to his forehead. "It's not magic, baby, just a game." But when he walked into the living room and looked at the single-framed picture of Sarah smiling with infant Lee in her arms, it felt as though the ghosts of his old life surrounded him. Meeting Miranda and Maya had ripped open a wound he thought had long healed. His refusal earlier wasn't rebellion, it was fear. Pure, suffocating fear of failing again. The next night, the atmosphere inside Ellison Financial practically buzzed. Word of the CEO's disastrous blind date had spread across the building like gossip on wings. Daniel kept his head low, pushing his cleaning cart through the gleaming hallways. He felt the weight of invisible stares from behind closed office doors. As he passed Gregory Pike's office, the door swung open. Gregory leaned against the frame with a smug grin. "Well, would you look at that?" he sneered. "The man of the hour, mixing with the elite, huh? How does it feel being back where you belong?" Daniel didn't break stride. "Excuse me, Mr. Pike, I need to finish this floor." The smirk faltered. Gregory had expected shame, maybe anger. What he got instead unsettled him. He still couldn't understand why Miranda hadn't fired Daniel immediately, and the unpredictability rattled him. Later that night, Daniel was wiping down the expansive mahogany conference table on the executive floor, a place always so quiet it felt like a museum. When the door clicked shut behind him, he turned and found Miranda standing there. She wasn't wearing her usual imposing suit. Instead, she had on simple black trousers and a soft gray sweater. Without the armor of her title, she looked under a broken bar and exhausted. "I reviewed your personnel file," she said calmly. "It's almost empty. A few years of custodial work, a warehouse job before that, and before that a broken bar. Nothing. It's the profile of a man trying very hard not to exist." Daniel focused on the table, wiping in slow, deliberate circles. "It's my life." "I'm not interested in your past," she replied, stepping closer. "I'm interested in my daughter." She hasn't smiled in a year. But tonight, she took a sugar packet, put it in a glass of water, and played your game alone for an hour. She was happy. He froze but kept his gaze down. "I'll pay you," she said directly. "Name your price." "I'll draw up a contract now." 1 hour a day with her. "You learn more in a week than you do here in a year." It was her world speaking, a world where even help came with an invoice. Daniel finally looked at her. The grief in his eyes made her inhale sharply. "You think this is about money?" he asked, his voice trembling with long-buried pain. "You think a check can rewrite what happened to me? The last time I tried to heal someone I loved a broken bar." He swallowed hard. "I held her hand while she died." He tightened his grip on the spray bottle. "I'm not a healer. I clean floors. And your money can't buy miracles." He pushed his cart past her and walked out, leaving her standing alone in the vast room, the scent of lemon polish lingering in the silence, and her power and her checkbook suddenly meaningless. Down on another floor, the hum of fluorescent lights filled the sterile office as Daniel moved through his final tasks. His encounter with Miranda had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. He felt detached, like a phantom drifting through a place where he didn't belong, and somehow she had seen that. His shift was nearly done. Soon he'd be on the bus home, kissing his daughter's forehead goodnight. He was emptying the last trash bin in the break room when a loud crash echoed from the kitchen area, followed by a stream of angry curses. It was Gregory Pike. Gregory staggered out of the kitchen, his tie crooked and his expression sour. "Porter," he barked, a slight slur in his voice. "There's an issue in there." Daniel glanced past him. A large glass jar of expensive coffee beans lay shrouded across the floor. Even worse, an industrial-sized bottle of thick caramel syrup had tipped over with it. The glossy liquid oozed across the white tiles, mixing with broken glass and thousands of beans in a sticky, 5-foot-wide disaster. It wasn't clumsy. It was intentional, an ugly message. "My bad, Porter," Gregory muttered, sounding anything but sorry. "Pretty clumsy of me. You'll take care of it, right? See you tomorrow." He slapped Daniel's shoulder and wobbled off toward the elevators. Daniel stared at the wreckage. Cleaning it would take hours. He wouldn't get home until late. Wouldn't be there to check on La. Anger hot, sharp, and long-forgotten arose in his chest. Gregory wasn't just making a mess. He was reminding Daniel of where he believed he belonged, at the bottom, cleaning up after others. For the next 2 days, Miranda devised a different strategy. If money and authority couldn't move Daniel Porter, she needed another way in. She instructed her trusted assistant to quietly look into his life outside of Ellison Financial. The request felt invasive, but she anchored herself with a single justification: "This is for Maya." The report was brief and painfully straightforward. He worked. He took his daughter to school. On Saturdays, he took her to the public library. On Sundays, when the weather was good, They visited Northwood Park, a home to a carousel his little girl adored. So on Sunday, under clear skies and cool air, Miranda dressed herself and Maya in plain sweaters and jeans, a clothes they hadn't touched in years. She felt out of place as the car pulled up to the lively park, filled with the sounds of families and carefree laughter. She spotted them immediately. Daniel sat on a bench, a worn paperback in hand, watching his daughter spin and giggle on the carousel. In the sunlight, he looked softer, calmer, like a man who had carved out one small corner of peace in the world. Miranda inhaled deeply and guided Maya toward the playground. Instead of approaching him outright, she chose a bench on the opposite side of the carousel. Her heart hammered, not with corporate confidence but vulnerable uncertainty. Maya stood beside her, gripping her mother's hand, her gaze fixed on the other children with a longing that pierced Miranda every time. She noticed them first. When the carousel slowed, she hopped off and dashed over, her pigtails bouncing. "Maya," she chirped with genuine excitement. "You came to the park." Maya offered a tiny wave. "Do you want to go on the swings?" La asked eagerly. "Daddy pushes me so high I can almost touch a cloud." Maya turned to her mother, eyes silently pleading. Miranda forced a nod. "Go on, sweetheart, play." She watched as La led Maya toward the swings. Daniel had looked up now, his book forgotten. The serene expression on his face disappeared, replaced by wary tension. He stood and approached her, stopping at a careful distance. "What are you doing here, Miss Ellison?" "My daughter wanted to visit the park," she answered evenly. It wasn't entirely untrue. "It's a big city," he said quietly. "Plenty of parks, but this one has a carousel," she replied, meeting his gaze and letting the pretense drop. "And I'm not here with money to offer you. I'm not here to boss you around." She nodded toward the swings. La chatted animatedly while Maya sat stiffly, watching rather than participating. "I'm here because my daughter is locked inside herself," Miranda said, her voice fragile. "And you, though I don't know why I hold a key. I saw it." She saw it. "She's been hoarding sugar packets since that night." Daniel's expression softened as he watched the girls. He saw La giving Maya's swing gentle pushes, trying to coax her into joining the play. He saw the faintest flicker of a smile on Maya's face, small but real, and he saw her loneliness, a quiet isolation he recognized too well. "I told you," he murmured, pain woven into every word. "I can't." Miranda stood, her composure faltering. Desperation broke through the polished surface she wore like armor. "Why?" "Because you're scared?" "I am too." Her voice trembled. "I'm terrified I'll never hear her voice again, that she'll grow up unable to say I love you, or I'm scared, or even her own name." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a raw whisper. "I don't know what happened to you or what shattered your life, but my little girl shouldn't have to bear the cost of it." She looked at Maya again, then back at him, her eyes shining. "Please, don't do it for me. Do it for her." Daniel followed her gaze. He saw a bright, joyful, unburdened. Then he saw Maya, a quiet reflection, waiting in the shadows. His resolve, built brick by brick from grief and self-blame, began to crack. For years he had lived behind walls so thick he believed nothing could break through. But the silent plea of a child was stronger than any defense he had built. He exhaled, a long, trembling breath he felt he'd been holding since the day he lost Sarah. "Okay," he said softly. "Fragile, real." Miranda sagged in relief, as though every string keeping her upright had been cut. "Thank you. I'll compensate you, of course." "We can draw up a contract and no," Daniel said firmly, but not with resistance this time. It was something else, setting the terms of his own surrender. "No contract, no a broken bar, no money," Daniel repeated quietly. "And no one at the office can ever know about this." "No one." Miranda stared at him, stunned. His refusal made no sense to her. "But you're tying me a broken bar, I should compensate. This isn't a job," he said firmly, meeting her eyes. "If I'm doing this, it's not as a therapist. I'm not that person anymore." He hesitated, swallowing hard as if the next words burned. "And there's one more rule. If at any point I feel I'm not helping Hira, if I can't reach Hira, I stop immediately. No arguments." It was his lifeline, the only way he could allow himself to step, even for a moment, back into the world he had abandoned. Miranda looked into his eyes and finally saw the truth. His refusal wasn't pride, it wasn't defiance, it was fear laid bare. It was a man trying to survive the aftermath of his own grief. "Agreed," she said softly, the sincerity in her voice startling even her. "All of it, thank you, Daniel." 2 evenings later, Daniel stood in the entryway of her penthouse, shifting awkwardly. The space was enormous and pristine, all marble and sharp edges. It felt less like a home and more like a gallery curated to impress investors. His faded hoodie and worn jeans made him feel like a smudge on a white canvas. Miranda guided him into the living room. Maya sat on a cream-colored rug, surrounded by immaculate educational toys as untouched as museum pieces. She looked up when Daniel entered, her guarded eyes flickering with uncertainty. "We can stay in here," Miranda said, trying too hard to sound pleasant. "I'll be in the kitchen if you need anything, a broken bar, anything at all." Daniel nodded, his pulse drumming. Doubt flooded him like a storm. "Why are you here? You can't do this anymore. You're going to disappoint here." A broken bar. He lowered himself onto the rug at a respectful distance from Maya. He didn't look at her. He didn't touch the toys. He simply sat and let the quiet settle. From the corner of his vision, he could see Miranda near the kitchen island, wringing her hands, her desperation practically vibrating through the room. With her hovering like that, Maya would never feel safe enough to open up. He turned toward her. "Could you give us the room?" he said gently. Miranda blinked. "Oh, I thought it's better if she doesn't feel observed," he explained, his voice carrying the calm authority of a man who once knew this work intimately. "Her silence protects her. She won't lower it if she feels analyzed." Miranda, who was used to commanding boardrooms, found herself nodding without argument. She retreated down the hall to her office, leaving the door slightly ajar. For nearly 20 minutes, Daniel did nothing but breathe and exist beside Maya. No instructions, no forced attempts at conversation, just presence. Then he reached into the small canvas bag he'd brought and placed 2 items on the rug, a smooth river stone and a thick blue crayon. He began quietly sketching a simple smiling face on the stone. When he finished, he set it between them. Maya's eyes flickered toward it. He then took out a second stone and offered her a red crayon without speaking before returning to his own drawing, now a crooked little star. For a long moment, she simply watched him. Then, with slow, deliberate movement, she reached out and took the red crayon. But instead of drawing on the stone, she leaned forward and gently drew a wavering red line across the back of Daniel's hand. A connection. Small, fragile, unmistakable. Daniel didn't move. He let her finish, his hands still and open. It was the first thread of trust, the quiet beginning of a conversation spoken without words. Elsewhere, in a polished downtown bar, Gregory Pike was nurturing poison. He sat with Wallace, a senior board member, swirling bourbon in his glass with a calculated air of concern. "I'm worried about her," Gregory said. "She's been a broken bar, distracted. Did you hear about that ridiculous blind date with the janitor? Of all people. Just poor judgment. I hope everything's stable at home." He let the insinuation linger like smoke. Wallace, a man who prized steady leadership, looked troubled. The seed had been planted. Back at the penthouse, when the hour ended, Danielle rose with the exhaustion of someone who'd carried an emotional boulder. "How was it?" Miranda asked instantly, rushing from her office the second she heard him move. "It went fine," he said simply. "We're just getting familiar with each other." After he left, Miranda returned to the rug. The stones Daniel had drawn on were still there. Beside them lay a sheet of paper that hadn't been there before. Maya must have fetched it on her own. On the paper was a shaky drawing, a smiling stick figure man holding hands with a little girl. Below their hands was a single red line. Miranda lifted the drawing, her hands trembling. It wasn't speech, but it was communication. It was a beginning. It was hopium, more precious to her than anything she had ever owned. Their sessions soon wove themselves into a quiet pattern. Twice a week, Daniel arrived after work, still faintly smelling of cleaning supplies. For an hour, they sat together on the white rug, the outside world falling away. There were no dramatic breakthroughs, no sudden miracles, only steady, gentle movement forward. Maya began using the stones to tell stories, a stone with a sad face placed apart from a cluster of smiling ones, a red line connecting a small stone to a larger stone. She was speaking in her own way and Daniel was learning how to listen. Daniel gradually pieced together bits of Maya's inner world day: how isolated she felt at school, how much she missed the dog her father took when he left, how the darkness in her room made her anxious at night. Every time he visited, Miranda would remain in the kitchen, pretending to work on her laptop, though her attention was always fixed on the quiet hum of the living room. She no longer strained to hear a word come from Maya. She listened instead to the gentle, living quality of the silence Daniel created. It was no longer the hollow kind that felt like loss. It had become a space filled with calm, invitation, and trust. Slowly, the exchanges between Miranda and Daniel before and after each session began to shift. One evening, as Daniel packed up his things, he remarked, "She keeps drawing houses, always with one window and someone looking out." Miranda leaned in the doorway, hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea. That was her father's studio. He painted there. She used to sit on the floor and watch him for hours. It was the first time she spoke of her ex-husband without bitterness. Another night, Daniel arrived looking tired, apologizing softly. "I'm late to a broken bar. Today's the anniversary of my wife's passing. Liz been struggling." Miranda set aside her tablet, her voice gentle. "Tell me about her." He stared down at a smooth river stone in his hand. "Sarah, she was a broken bar brightness. She believed everyone carried the sun within them. You just had to be quiet enough to hear it." She would have known exactly what Maya needed. No tricks. In these quiet confessions, the distance between the polished CEO and the weary janitor began to dissolve. She saw the deeply wounded, brilliant man hidden behind a simple uniform, and he saw the woman beneath the icy composure, a mother terrified of failing her child. They were two single parents trying to build stability out of grief, forging a fragile, unspoken connection in the hush of a little girl's world. But someone else noticed the shift. Gregory Pike hated feeling out of control. He watched Miranda's softened demeanor, the occasional spring in her step, and the way she now sometimes dismissed her driver to walk alone, heading toward the run-down streets Daniel lived in. Whatever was happening, it involved Porter, and Gregory considered it a threat. He decided the janitor needed to disappear from the equation entirely. His plan was calculated and ruthless. He chose a night when he knew the senior partner, Mr. Abernathy, would still be working. Abernathy was obsessive about his possessions, especially the antique gold fountain pen worth a small fortune, the one he kept prominently on his desk. While Daniel was cleaning another floor, Gregory slipped into the office and took it, but he wasn't going to risk being the one caught planting it. Instead, he handed the pen to Peterson, his eager-to-please subordinate, along with clear instructions: use the copied master key, open Daniel's locker, and bury the pen in the pocket of his old work jacket. Once the deed was done, Gregory placed an anonymous call to security, reporting suspicious activity near Abernathy's office. When Daniel went to clock out, 2 security guards blocked his path. Henderson, the usually friendly lead guard, looked uncharacteristically stern. "Mr. Porter, we need you to come with us." Daniel's chest tightened. Something was wrong. "A theft has been reported on the executive floor," Henderson explained. "We're required to search all staff on duty." Daniel followed them to the custodial closet where his locker sat. He opened it with steady hands, though his pulse hammered in his ears. The guards sifted through his belongings, until one reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the gleaming gold pen, the very one Abernathy treasured. Henderson's expression darkened. "Care to explain this?" Daniel stared at it in disbelief. It felt surreally like a nightmare snapping into place. He whispered, "That isn't many a broken bar." "I don't know how they always say that," Henderson muttered, pulling out a pair of zip ties. "Mr. Abernathy is on his way down. He wants to press charges." Daniel was taken to the basement security office, a cramped stairroom lit by flickering bulbs. The pen lay on the table like a sentence already passed. Henderson asked questions, but all Daniel could think of was La's asleep at home, waiting for him. What would happen to her if he didn't return? Then the door flew open. Abernathy stormed in, red-faced and furious. "That's him, the thief. I want him arrested immediately. Call the police." Daniel felt the floor drop out from under him, his word against theirs, a janitor against the senior partner. But before the guards could move, a cool, decisive voice sliced through the room. "That won't be necessary, Philip." Miranda stood in the doorway, still in her work clothes, arms crossed, radiating an authority that made even Abernathy fall silent. Henderson straightened reflexively. "Miranda," Abernathy stuttered. "This is a security issue. This man is my employee," she cut in. "Which makes it my issue." "You may leave, Philip. Henderson and I will handle this," Abernathy sputtered, then retreated. Miranda turned to Daniel. "Are you hurt?" He shook his head, unable to speak. She then faced Henderson. "Tell me everything." He walked her through the events at the anonymous call, the search, the pen in the jacket. When he finished, Miranda frowned. "This doesn't add up," she murmured. She looked at Daniel. "I offered this man life-changing money, and he refused." "Why would someone who rejects a fortune steal a pen?" No one had an answer. "Pull the security footage," she ordered. "All of it, executive floor and custodial area." Last few hours. They spent the next stretch watching sped-up footage in the monitoring room. Daniel going about his duties, Abernathy leaving his office. "Nothing unusual." "There's nothing here," Henderson said. "Keep looking," Miranda insisted. "Find the person who isn't supposed to be there." Then she spotted it, a shadow moving near the custodial closet. At a time Daniel was on another floor. "Stop. Go back. Zoom in." The image sharpened. It wasn't Gregory. It was Peterson. He hovered anxiously before slipping into the custodian's closet. 10 seconds later, he emerged and hurried away. "What time was that?" Miranda asked. Henderson checked the timestamp. A few minutes later, the anonymous call was logged. "Enough," she said coldly. "Release Mr. Porter immediately, and apologize." She personally escorted Daniel to the elevator. Inside the quiet, mirrored space, he finally managed to whisper, "Thank you." "They were going to arrest me." "Yeah, broken bar. I didn't know you didn't need to," she said, facing him. "I already knew you were innocent." "How?" he asked, voice trembling. "Because I know the kind of man you are," she replied. "The man who turns sugar packets into games just to make a little girl feel safe. The man who speaks of his late wife like she's still the center of his world." "You are not a thief." Her unwavering belief hit him harder than the accusation itself. For the first time in a long while, someone truly saw him. The elevator chimed. The doors slid open. Daniel hesitated, overwhelmed. "Go home to your daughter," Miranda whispered, eyes bright with unshed emotion. He stepped out but looked back. Their eyes held for a long, electric moment. Something fragile, new, and powerful forming between them. The threat had passed, but nothing between them would ever be the same. Gregory Pike felt the consequences immediately. Peterson was fired and disgraced, and though Miranda didn't remove Gregory, which in some ways was far harsher as influence evaporated overnight, the failed scheme had exposed him, and now he was left to face the slow unraveling of everything he thought he controlled. Stripped of his authority and removed from every project, he was left to rot in his office like a ghost trapped in a glass cage. Everyone could see him, yet no one acknowledged him. He had become an outcast, and his bitterness grew darker with each passing day. For Daniel and Miranda, that disastrous incident had burned away every layer of pretense between them. The crisis had forged something stronger, an unspoken trust that felt almost physical. Their friendship, once limited to quiet moments during Mia's therapy sessions, now had room to breathe out in the open. One weekend, Miranda insisted that Daniel and La join her and Maya for dinner, not at some overpriced restaurant, but inside her huge, sterile apartment, a place she was desperately trying to make feel lived in. They ate pizza on the living room floor. A wildly out-of-character choice for a penthouse resident. La and Maya built a ridiculous fort out of sofa cushions and expensive designer blankets. For the first time, Danielle saw Miranda genuinely laugh, unrestrained, warm, and so unexpected that even she seemed startled by the sound. The moment happened when La stuck a black olive on her nose and proudly declared herself a unicorn. Later, after the girls fell asleep inside their cushioned castle, Daniel and Miranda sat on the balcony. The city below glittered like scattered stars. "I never do this," she admitted, motioning toward the messy, chaotic living room. Sit, relax. My life is just a broken bar schedule stacked on top of more schedules. Mine too, Daniel said. Work, sleep, convince Lit to eat something green. Repeat, is that enough for you? She asked quietly. He paused, watching the river of headlights far below. It is when she's happy. That's all I need. She looked at him with an understanding deeper than words. You get that better than anyone. And in that moment, the invisible wall between them flickered. She was no longer the CEO, and he was no longer the janitor. Just two people who had somehow found steady ground in each other in the middle of a storm. But the storm wasn't gone. It was gathering strength. The company announced a mandatory town hall meeting. Officially, it was for quarterly results and a new strategic plan. Unofficially, the entire building buzzed with only one topic: the rumor mill targeting Miranda, her supposed instability, and her inappropriate involvement with the janitor. Daniel was assigned to work the event as just another uniformed employee checking badges and directing people into the enormous auditorium. He felt the stares, the pity, that disdain. He had become a character in a story he never asked to be part of. He took a spot against the back wall as the room filled. Board members settled in the front row looking grim. Then Miranda stepped onto the stage. She looked poised and powerful in a charcoal suit, but Daniel could see the tightness in her shoulders. Their eyes met briefly, a silent message. I'm here. The presentations dragged in off financial charts, marketing videos, corporate fillra, but the tension was thick. Everyone was waiting. Then came the QA. A few harmless questions passed, and then Daniel saw Hema Gregory Pike marching to the microphone with smug confidence. He fixed his gaze on Miranda, his face molded into a mask of polite poison. He began with fake gratitude before shifting to his true intent. He spoke of concerns, hinted at her lack of focus, and then delivered a blow of rumors, distractions, and a disturbing lapse in judgment. His voice dripped with disdain as he referenced her mingling with the service staff. A horrified murmur moved through the auditorium. Eyes swung toward Miranda. Even the board looked frozen. Daniel felt the blood drain from his body, his hands curling into fists. Miranda stood absolutely still. A long, suffocating silence filled the room. Then she looked at Gregory, then the crowd, and finally Daniel. She drew in a slow, steady breath, and then she smiled, a quiet, sad, devastating smile. Not a smile of defeat, a smile of a woman who had just realized she held the sharpest weapon in the room. She leaned forward. Thank you, Gregory, she said, her voice calm and impossibly controlled. Judgment is part of my job. So let me tell you a story, a broken bar about judgment. The room seemed to lean in. For the last year, she said, her tone softening into something vulnerable, my 5-year-old daughter, Maya, has not spoken a single word. A stunned gasp spread through the auditorium. The contrast between the personal story and the cold corporate setting made it impossible to look away. Her father left, Miranda continued, steady despite the emotion trembling beneath her words. And in the aftermath, Maya's voice was another casualty. I judged the situation the way I was trained to. I threw money at it. I hired the best specialists. They analyzed her, labeled her, pushed her, and all they did was make her silence heavier. She turned her gaze directly to Gregory, her voice unwavering. Then a few weeks ago, some of my brilliant employees decided it would be amusing to arrange a fake date for me. Broken bar with the janitor. Another shocked gasp. It was cruel, she said, humiliating. And the man at the center of that joke had every reason to walk away. But he didn't. He stayed. And in the process, he noticed what none of the specialists did, a lonely little girl who needed gentleness, not charts. Her eyes sought Daniel at the back of the room. He didn't come with a degree. He didn't bring a theory. He brought a broken bar of sugar packet. She smiled faintly. And with that silly little sugar packet, he made my daughter smile for the first time in a year. The room was silent and breathless. I learned that this janitor, the man so many of you dismissed without a second thought, was once one of the country's most respected pediatric speech therapists. He helped countless children find their voices, but after his wife died of cancer, he convinced himself he no longer deserved to help anyone. So he hid, judged himself broken. Many people were openly crying now. Even board members stared down at their hands, ashamed. Miranda's voice softened to a tender, raw honesty. For weeks now, This man has been meeting with my daughter secretly, a broken bar without pay, without recognition, a broken bar. He had asked for nothing, no praise, no payment, no recognition. Daniel had quietly, patiently been guiding Maya back toward her voice, step by gentle step. He had also shown Miranda something she had forgotten, that a person's value has nothing to do with the title on their business card. Miranda drew in a trembling breath, her eyes bright with emotion. She was no longer speaking like the CEO of a powerful company. She was a mother sharing a miracle with hundreds of silent witnesses. So to answer your question about my judgment, Gregory, a broken bar, her voice wavered, but only for a moment. This morning, because of that man's kindness, my daughter said her first word in a year. She swallowed, she looked at me, and she said, broken bar, mommy. A wave of sound rippled through the auditorium, gasps, broken sobs, choked breaths. The dam of silence shattered. The entire room felt it. Someone began clapping, then another, and another. Within moments, the entire auditorium was standing, applause erupting like a storm, loud, fierce, compassionate. They weren't applauding the CEO, they were applauding the mother whose heart had finally been given back to her. Gregory Pike stood rooted in the aisle, white as chalk. His plan, intended to publicly humiliate her, had recoiled on him with brutal force. 2 security officers appeared at his side and escorted him out without a word. Through his own blurred vision, Daniel watched Miranda stand beneath the lights, letting the applause wash over her like a healing tide. When the noise finally softened, she made one final announcement. Effective immediately, she said, voice steady again, Ellison Financial will establish a new charitable initiative via the Maya's Voice Foundation. It will provide free therapeutic services to children who have faced trauma. Her gaze swept the room, then drifted to the very back, landing on Daniel with quiet certainty. And I already know who was meant to lead it. Hours later, when the building had emptied and the frenzy had faded, she found him in the vast marble lobby. The sunset cast warm gold across the floor. Well, she said with a soft, exhausted smile, director of the foundation, the position is yours. I've broken bar if you want me for it, Daniel said, overwhelmed. After everything you said up to there, yeah, I don't know how to. You don't need to say anything, she whispered, stepping closer. The final inches between them disappeared. You gave my daughter her voice back, and somewhere along the way, a broken bar, I think you found yours, too, and you healed me, Daniel said quietly. It wasn't dramatic, it was simply the truth. Her belief in him had been the one thing he had never found in himself. Miranda lifted a hand and brushed away a tear he didn't even realize had escaped. Strange, isn't it? She murmured. They tried to play a joke, match the janitor with the CEO. And what happened? He asked, heartbeat stuttering. Her smile bloomed, warm and luminous. The janitor saved the CEO and her child. He leaned in, and she met him halfway. Their first kiss was tender, unsure but certain, a promise wrapped inside a breath. And it wasn't the end of a corporate scandal, it was the beginning of something that had quietly been growing all along, a love built on trust, kindness, and courage. A year later, the Maya's Voice Foundation felt nothing like an office and nothing like a clinic. Sunshine spilled through wide windows. The walls were covered with children's bright, messy artwork, and in one corner sat a huge beanbag shaped like a friendly blue monster. In a cozy room bathed in soft light, Daniel sat on a low stool. A small boy sat on the floor across from him, knees tucked to his chest, big eyes wary. The child hadn't spoken since witnessing a devastating car accident months earlier. Daniel said nothing. He just rolled a lump of soft blue clay between his palms. He shaped it into a snake, then flattened it, rolled it again, formed a ball, poked holes. The quiet squish of clay filled the room. At last, the boy pointed at the clay. It was the first gesture he had made all session. Daniel smiled gently, broke off a piece, and held it out. The boy hesitated, then reached for it, a beginning, a small, fragile, but real. Daniel was no longer just a healer. He was a gardener of small, silent gardens, attending to tender minds, helping them bloom in their own time. He had rediscovered his gift, not in a prestigious institution, but in the quiet place where healing truly lives. And when 5 p.m. arrived, he left on time. The old Daniel would have worked himself numb, But this Daniel had something far more important waiting for him. He drove home to a peaceful neighborhood, to a house with a yard and a swing set. The moment he walked through the door, he heard laughter. He followed the sound to the living room, where Miranda sat on the floor with Leah and Maya, sleeves rolled up, building a sprawling Lego castle. Maya screeched with joy as she swooped the clunky Lego dragon over the towers. "Princess Leia," she cried, "save us." "Never fear," Leia announced dramatically. "My magical knight will protect the castle." She held up a crooked Lego figure. Daniel stepped forward. "Your magical knight has arrived," he said, leaning down to kiss Miranda. "Daddy!" Leia and Maya shrieked, hurling themselves at him. He lifted both girls into his arms, one on each side, amazed at how complete life suddenly felt. He had a purpose, a home, a family. The ghosts of the past were finally still. Weeks later, on a warm autumn afternoon, Daniel and Miranda married beneath the sprawling branches of an old oak tree in their backyard. No audience, no cameras, no investors, just their daughters. Lou stood proudly as maid of honor, holding a bouquet of wildflowers she had collected herself. Maya, bubbling with non-stop chatter, something that never failed to make Miranda cry, carried the rings on a small satin pillow. Daniel took Miranda's hands. "I once told you I wasn't a healer," he said, voice thick. "I was wrong. You healed me. You saw me when I was invisible. You reminded me who I'm meant to be. I love you." Miranda blinked through tears. "And I used to think strength meant being untouchable," she whispered. "You taught me that real strength is letting someone in. You and your daughter came into my life on one of the cruelest nights, a broken bar, and turned it into the greatest blessing. I love you, Daniel Porter." They kissed as the girls tossed wildflower petals into the air, giggling. Later, they lay on a blanket in the yard, watching the first stars prick the sky. The girls snuggled sleepily between them. "You know," Miranda murmured, resting her head on his shoulder, "Gregory Pike tried so hard to humiliate us." Danielle stared up at the peaceful sky, remembering the cold restaurant, the laughter, the shame. It felt like a lifetime ago, a story from someone else's past. "And what happened?" he whispered. She threaded her fingers through his, warm and sure. "He introduced me to my husband, and that was the real ending.